Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Hi guys, I am here in Atlanta, Georgia, just wrapping up my fight at the OTE arena. I know a lot of you have a lot of questions, a lot of you are very upset. I want you guys to know I am okay. I am not upset. It was a bad call. They replayed it. You know, it's on camera. Film doesn't lie. It cost me the decision. We all know who won. We all know who should have won. I know I won. I worked really hard. I got tackled to the ground. You know, my foot was stepped on several times, resulting in a false knockdown, which they wrongly counted. Bad calls are made every day. Unfortunately, you know, we have not done anything to change that, but we will.
It was a tough break for young Zarina McCoy opposite the ring, veteran Charisse Brown.
Charisse has been in there with a lot of people, a lot of fighters.
Fighters like Sarah Liegman, Beck Hawker, Beatrice Ferreira, Vanessa Brown, Kyria Tapia.
She was just in there with young Zarina McCoy.
Zarina makes a valid point that, you know, Zarina, the southpaw, Charisse Brown, the orthodox fighter, what often happens when orthodox fighters fight southpaws is their feet tend to get crossed, and sometimes that results in slips and trips, and that's what happened.
Zarina tripped, but it was scored an official knockdown, and you have to wonder that if not for that, would Zarina have got the decision, because she lost a split decision.
One or two tough breaks for young Zarina McCoy, only 22 years old. Her first professional loss, quote-unquote loss, south of the border, which shouldn't have been a loss at all.
Yeah, I saw that fight.
Fight with Eloise Zaraga a few fights ago, south of the border. Zarina should have won that fight.
She could have won this one if that slip wasn't ruled a knockdown.
Opposite the ring, Charisse Brown from right here in the United States, who's about 14 years Zarina McCoy's senior. Charisse is 36, whereas Zarina is 22. And even though I feel that Zarina could have and should have won this fight, if not for that slip, it was too close for comfort for me. It was close in spots.
It shouldn't have been.
This was part of an OTX promotion, OTX, that has inked a pact with the people at the zone and have been doing a series of fights on the platform.
This was one of them.
Zarina McCoy sports a professional record of 11 wins with 2 losses. Really shouldn't be any. 11 wins, 2 losses with no draws, 3 knockouts.
Observations.
She's carrying too much weight. She's carrying too much weight, and it's slowing her down. She looked a bit flat yesterday.
It's too much.
Zarina, when I first saw her, used to campaign all the way down there at super flyweight. And because she's so young and her body is still growing, it's conceivable that maybe she can't make that weight. Maybe she can't make super flyweight anymore. In more recent years, she's been campaigning anywhere in between 135 and 140.
That's too high.
Right now it is. That's too high, and she's carrying too much weight. She's only 22 years old. I feel that ideally, Zarina would be campaigning anywhere in between 118 pounds and perhaps 126. That's anywhere in between bantamweight, super bantamweight, and featherweight.
She's carrying too much weight.
It's not saying that Zarina doesn't have the frame to perhaps one day compete as a super featherweight, a lightweight, or a super lightweight. One day she might, but here and now at 22 years old where she is, she really should be campaigning below those weights.
It's slowing it down.
That is at least in part what I think is going on. Zarina McCoy fights out of the southpaw stance, and she's a pure boxer. She's a cerebral fighter.
Keeps a good schedule of activity. She fought 4 times last year.
Thinking man's fighter, 1 and 2 punches at a time, creating space, beating those feet, and moving around. She's a pure boxer, at times flustered by the come-forward aggression of Charisse Brown, stepping into her jab and bringing punches over.
I think she would have handled herself better if she weren't carrying as much weight.
She looked a bit slow to me. Her punches seemed a bit flat and wide, not much snap on them.
Lost form a couple of times as Charisse Brown applied pressure.
Lost her form a couple of times, lost her footing. I happen to think that 135, 140, she shouldn't be up there. Even if there's a legitimate argument that she could have and should have won yesterday's fight.
If not for that slip.
Performance-wise, I didn't really like how she looked in there.
She looked slow, she looked flat, she looked flustered.
Feel like it shouldn't have been close enough, that a slip or a trip determined the outcome of the match. That while she's still amassing professional experience at this young age, she should be campaigning at a lower weight where she can land punches with more authority.
That's it.
She's got to slim down. Even if she can't make super flyweight anymore. Super flyweight, that's 115 pounds. What about 118? What about 122 or 126?
She's only 22. She can make those weights.
I think she would be a lot faster, a lot sharper, and a lot stronger at those weights than what we're seeing in between 135 and 140. I don't think she should be up there right now. So it is unfortunate.
These things happen.
Still have a very high opinion of Zarina's boxing, but moving forward, adjustments need to be made.
She don't want this to happen again.
Men's welterweight news. Terence Crawford on negotiating with Spence. He probably felt he gave up too much, but I felt it was fair. Many people criticized Terence Crawford's negotiation tactics and how all of that went in the buildup of what became the Errol Spence Jr. fight, what is the signature fight and the signature win of his career. He was criticized.
Time has proven him wise.
There was a point in time where I shifted gears and I shifted my mind off of Errol Spence because I didn't feel like the fight was going to happen, Crawford said. But once I left Top Rank and we started negotiating, I was like, oh well, maybe this fight will happen. Then I ended up fighting Evanesian because of the conversation and everything we was talking about. To get the fight done, it wasn't lining up to what I wanted. So I decided to take another fight and came back to the table. Hey, listen,
Look.
let's get this fight made. At the time, the fight wasn't going the way that I would have liked it to go. So I just hit up Spence, hey man, listen, if you and me are gonna fight, get this done because there's a lot of people blocking the fight.
Remember that at this time, Terence Crawford wasn't with Bob Arum or Top Rank anymore, but Errol Spence.
All of last year, Terence Crawford was a network and promotional free agent. So nobody on his side could have been blocking the fight, but what about Errol's? And what about that plan to put him in the ring with Keith Thurman at junior middleweight?
When he says that there were people blocking the fight, too many people blocking the fight, he's likely talking about people on Spence's side.
Remember, early last year, the VP of Communications at the PBC did not have faith that this fight would be financially viable. He felt that it wouldn't make any money and people would steal it. That's what the VP of Communications had to say in reference to the bout.
And remember that the offer they made to Terence Crawford didn't even come with a guarantee. It didn't come with a guarantee to either Terence Crawford or Errol Spence.
Can you imagine a fight that's taken 5 years to make, an undisputed welterweight title tilt for no money down?
No guarantees.
My opinion is they made Terence Crawford an offer last year that they didn't expect him to take so that when he walks away, they can blame him.
Wrap it around his neck.
That's what that was. That wasn't a serious offer. So when he goes in there and he ends up fighting David Evanesian as a keep busy fight after those talks fall apart, he gets criticized for it.
That's what the PBC wanted. They wanted to make it look like it's his fault when in reality they were negotiating in bad faith.
Just business-wise, I felt I was worth X amount and they felt like I wasn't. They wanted to do the deal a certain way and I wanted to do the deal a certain way. Errol Spence seen it. He was agreeing with everything that I said. We can do this and we can do that. He probably felt like he gave up too much at the end when it was all said and done. But I felt like everything was fair.
He not only beat Errol Spence Jr. in the squared circle, he beat the PBC in the boardroom.
Did you notice that the structure of the deal changed from last year into this one? This year, we saw reports that the fighters were, in fact, going to be getting guaranteed cash, which is the opposite of what we saw last year.
There were no guarantees.
Terence Crawford explains that beating Errol Spence Jr. wasn't as easy as it looked.
I feel like that set of negotiations late last year was a last gasp effort to kill this fight, not make it.
A last-ditch effort to get Terence Crawford to go away and leave Spence alone.
Even if the boxing community at large didn't realize it at the time. You see what Terence is saying now. He says that there were people blocking the fight.
Terence himself didn't have any people on his side because he wasn't with Top Rank and Bob Arum anymore. Thus, the people he's referring to are likely people on Errol's side.
They knew what was going to happen.
Wouldn't say it was easy because I trained so fucking hard for that fight, said Crawford during an interview with The Breakfast Club. I put the work in.
He did.
You put the work in the gym. You graft and you train and you prepare as best as you can so when fight night rolls around, that's the easy part.
many times the last 5 years did I tell you that Errol Spence Jr. is not living right? He's not living like a fighter.
While Terence Crawford is regularly seen in the gym preparing himself and other fighters in between his own fights, more often than not, what you see Errol doing is drinking himself into a stupor.
Terence Crawford continued, "It may look easy on TV, but there's a lot that goes into fighting."
The time and attention to detail, the discipline it takes to not imbibe in alcoholic beverages and toxify your temple as a fighter. That's what he's talking about. Fight night looks easy because of the work he already put in.
You stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
That's what that is. The shock and awe from the Errol Spence Jr. faction of fans who feel blindsided by all of this, latching onto conspiracy theories and intangibles to explain why Errol was so easily dismantled, so easily beaten. It's because in between fights, Terence isn't ballooning in weight and
Flipping Ferraris and drinking himself into a coma.
the Errol Spence Jr. faction of fans was viewing Errol through rose-tinted lenses. In their own mind's eye, they didn't see this coming.
Nope.
The most vocal,
And the most obnoxious, often going out of their way to get into arguments with online strangers.
obnoxious to strangers online, obnoxious to Terence Crawford himself.
I saw one lady claim that Errol Spence Jr. was going to punish Terence Crawford right before the fight.
Only so that same lady can claim that Terence Crawford weight drained him after the fight.
She retarded?
Most Errol Spence Jr. fans are.
Couldn't find a more stupid group of people in the boxing community. You really couldn't. A more deluded group of fight fans.
Telling themselves whatever they've got to tell themselves to denigrate Terence Crawford's victory and cope for being this wrong, missing it by this much, going as far as saying that Terence weight drained Errol?
Hey, so when I stop him, y'all gonna say he was too weak.
On my
and,
life.
and he stayed at 147.
You would not stop
too
me.
long.
You would not stop me.
Okay.
Crazy. What's you smoking on? Ask the man, who the hardest.
Now, the word around the campfire, at least according to Boxing Insider Rick Glacier, is rumors abound that Errol Spence is invoking the rematch clause with Terence Crawford, but Spence has until this Tuesday, August 29th, to invoke the clause with Crawford. Crawford gets to pick the weight. Keep in mind that Showtime Sports honcho Stefan Espinoza doesn't want the rematch.
As it'll be a pay-per-view financial bloodbath, as the first fight was so one-sided.
Espinoza would prefer that Crawford fight Jaron Boots Ennis, which would be a very hot fight for boxing enthusiasts.
But not a big fight commercially. Don't get it in your head that because a couple of guys know who Boots is, that's a big money fight. It's not.
A bigger fight with Terence Crawford, if he doesn't end up fighting Errol Spence Jr., would be to fight the winner of Tszyu versus Mendoza. What could be for not just one, but two alphabet titles at a fourth weight. A fourth weight for Terence.
Jaron Boots Ennis, the would-be boogeyman of the 147-pound division, who already had the chance to fight Terence Crawford earlier this year when Black Prime reached out to him. Reached out to his father, I should say.
His father admitted that himself on the Stamina for Sale podcast with Tunde Ayahi and Spencer Fearon. So these are not just the ramblings of Julius, the content creator. His own father admitted Black Prime reached out to him.
And all you could talk about is how you're loyal to Showtime. That even though you ain't got a contract with them, you're loyal to them, and they have to be involved.
Missed your chance. You snooze, you lose.
If Errol Spence Jr. does end up activating that rematch clause, he's just gonna get his ass kicked again.
It's up to Al Heyman and Stefan Espinoza to convince him of otherwise, to convince him not to activate that rematch clause and go another route, go another way.
Errol Spence potentially activating that clause would throw a serious monkey wrench in Terrence's future plans to move up in weight and take on Canelo Alvarez.
That would be my opportunity to show everybody how great Terence Crawford really is. If Canelo accepts my challenge and I come up to 168 to challenge him for undisputed at his weight, then I'm going to show everybody that I've got the skills to do it all in that ring. I believe if Canelo beats Jermell, that's the next fight to be made.
As one-sided as that fight was.
And the probability that he will lose the rematch in the same or worse fashion than he lost the first fight, I don't really see a need. I don't really see a reason for Terence to have to run it back with Errol again, but Errol does have a rematch clause. He has a right to a second fight.
The hunger that Terence Crawford has, the hunger he still has, even though he's more accomplished than Errol Spence Jr. by and large, but he is a much, much hungrier fighter than Errol.
I think he's hungrier than a lot of other fighters. I think he's hungrier than many of his contemporaries because of all the credit he's been deprived of over the years. They don't give him any credit for being an undisputed champion at 140 pounds, now at 147. They're already denigrating his victory over Errol, coming up with every excuse in the book.
Some are holding out hope that 154 pounds Errol will be stronger and more durable, and perhaps he can pull a rabbit out of a hat, but I've no doubts.
Just gonna end up getting his ass kicked again. And when he gets his ass kicked again, they're still not gonna give Terence Crawford credit. They're still gonna make excuses. That's why this guy's still hungry.
If he were to go up to 168 and fight Canelo, should Canelo beat Jermell, there are no excuses you could make for Canelo. There are no excuses you could make to denigrate Terence's victory.
That's how he sees it. That if he moves up there, he fights that guy and he beats that guy. Remember, that guy's a naturally bigger fighter than Terence Crawford, a younger fighter than Terence Crawford.
Yeah.
Ranked
as one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport. Even if he's not number one, many people still have him in their top 5.
fiscally for Terence Crawford. That's the biggest bang for your buck fight that you could hope to be in. Financially, there is no bigger fight than a Canelo Alvarez fight. A Spence rematch, that's going to sell even less at the box office than the first fight did, because we saw what happened in the first fight.
Showtime has got to talk Errol Spence Jr. out of it.
It's his right to a rematch, but it's on their dime. If there were to be a second fight, where do you think the money would come from? Who do you think would be on the hook to pay for it? They would.
And according to Rick Glacier, they don't want that. I can believe it.
Why would they? Errol Spence Jr. losing the way that he did is a critical hit to their brand of boxing, because he's been a PBC fighter for as long as I can remember. He's a big part of their bottom line.
And the veil has been lifted.
Guys only look good when you're fighting each other. You only look halfway decent inside of your bubble. They let somebody in that bubble.
You get exposed.
Credit to Errol Spence Jr. for standing on his word 10 toes down and deciding to go through with the Terence Crawford fight in spite of what his handlers wanted. His handlers didn't want him to fight Terence, but he did.
He deserves some credit for that, but as far as ability,
He ain't got it for Terence Crawford, and he never did. If he fights him for a second time, what we're looking at, what we could be looking at, is the end of Errol Spence Jr., because you can't take 2 systematic beatings like that consecutively.
it'll ruin you.
Now, some feel that he is ruined already, and on that predication, they're tearing Terence Crawford down, depriving him of any credit for annihilating Errol, even though that didn't stop them from picking Errol ahead of the fight so they could start moving goalposts after the fight.
Oh, now he's got neurological damage? Now he was weight drained? Then why'd you pick him?
Because you're a fucking cornflake, that's why.
Loser!
See how it checks out, and we'll see if this upcoming Tuesday Errol decides to activate that rematch clause, though if he does,
Just gonna get beat again.
it's not going to be any different in a second fight, because Terence always was the better fighter.
It's not gonna change based on the weight.